In 1863, the two armies of the North and South collided in the crossroads town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. In its aftermath, 51,000 casualties, along with 5,000 dead horses, littered the farmlands. The town and its people would never be the same again. Today, Gettysburg honors its past with its meticulously maintained battlefield and monuments, and it celebrates its peaceful and fun-loving present. You will find some of the best food, libation, and the friendliest people you'll ever meet. I'm Mary Jo Powell, introducing you to the stars and bars of Gettysburg. In this video, we'll give you a tour of the battlefield, show you where to stay, eat, drink, and experience some of the nightlife and the people who are the stars in the bars you'll encounter on this Civil War journey. I'm Mary Jo Powell, and these are the stars and bars of Gettysburg. They say all roads end somewhere. Here in Gettysburg, 10 major roads converge on this spot, the town square. And that's how both armies ended up here. On July 1st in 1863, major forces under General Henry Heath were scouting the lines west of Chambersburg, with orders not to engage any Federal forces they may encounter. As Northern cavalry, the eyes and ears of the armies under the command of General John Buford spotted Heath's Confederate forces, word was sent back to commanding General George Gordon Meade, and the primary forces of the Union Army advanced. At this spot on the Chambersburg Pike, 3 miles west of town, the first shot was fired by Union Lieutenant Marcellus Jones of the 8th Illinois Cavalry, and the fight was on. Rebel forces advanced as infantry reinforcements arrived under Major General John F. Reynolds of the Union First Corps. The Confederate assault down the Chambersburg Pike was repulsed, but in these woods, General Reynolds was fatally wounded. Now, among the things to look for on the first day's battlefield is this artillery piece. It's a 3-inch ordnance gun at the base of Buford's statue. Gun number 233 is one of 4 3-inch ordnance rifles of Battery A, 2nd U.S. Artillery. It rests on the spot where they fired the opening artillery salvo of that pivotal battle. On the afternoon of July 1st, this unfinished railroad cut served as protection to the Confederate units advancing in the field, but became a trap when Federal troops attacked the cut. Troops under Confederate Brigadier General Joseph Davis's brigade were trapped as Union troops of the 6th Wisconsin and the 84th and 95th New York attacked from the south. 160 out of 450 men of the Union forces fell in that charge. But as the embankment of the cut was so steep, the Confederates found it impossible to return fire. Many Confederates were killed and over 200 were captured. Buford used the cupola of this building, the Lutheran Seminary, as a lookout post, observing the advance of Confederate forces along this ridgeline, directing fire on those opposing forces. Elements of the 1st and 11th Corps occupied a tenuous position along McPherson's and Oak Ridges, and had managed to hold those positions since the mid-morning. Federal reinforcements, however, were slow to arrive. The Army of Northern Virginia, by contrast, was growing in strength at an almost exponential rate. Arriving from the north, the divisions of Generals Robert Rhodes and Jubal Early threatened the Federals' exposed left. In the late afternoon, Rhodes' division smashed into the 1st Corps troops on Oak Ridge. Seen at the top of the hill is the Eternal Peace Memorial, dedicated on July 3, 1938, commemorating the 75th anniversary of the battle. President Franklin D. Roosevelt presided over 250,000 attendees at that Gettysburg reunion dedication. And of those attendees, 1,800 were actual Civil War veterans, ranging in age from 88 to 112. The natural gas light burns as a reminder of lasting peace and unity of a nation. As the battle progressed, troops from both sides received reinforcements. The Confederate movement forced the Union back into town, and house-to-house fighting took place. Several remainders of the action can be seen if you know where to look. Cannonballs embedded in buildings and walls riddled with bullet holes remained from the Confederate takeover of the town. As the sun sets, the battle ends, with both sides positioning themselves in a fishhook configuration. The North around Culp's Hill down through Cemetery Ridge, the South along Seminary Ridge. Our second day's trek takes us to a place called Spangler Springs, where Union and Confederate troops drank the cool water from the flowing springs while nursing their wounds. As you climb the hill, more monuments dot the landscape, indicating the positions of the two armies. After visiting Culp's Hill, we venture to the far left side of the Federal line, which takes us to another well-known hill on the Gettysburg battlefield. This is known as Little Round Top, where on the second day, the Federal troops were ordered to hold this position at all costs. On the extreme left was the 20th Maine, led by Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, a college professor who, after running out of ammunition, ordered a bayonet charge against the advancing rebel troops, saving the Federal left from collapsing. A statue of General G.K. Warren, who recognized the significance of occupying this high ground, now stands here. One tradition of visiting Little Round Top is rubbing the nose of Colonel Paddy O'Rourke. It's said to bring the luck of the Irish. So many hidden findings on the battlefield, like rock carvings. Here's an example behind the 91st Pennsylvania on Little Round Top. Far below, visitors can see an outcrop or series of rocks known as Devil's Den. Confederates sought protection in these rocks from the Yankee troops on Little Round Top, and taking sniper positions fired back. While some were successful in their endeavors, others didn't fare as well. Rebel attempts to take the high ground held by the Union forces led this land to become known as the Valley of Death. From Devil's Den, the road takes us to the wheat field, where men from the Federal lines advanced to secure the high ground, running into Longstreet's Confederates hidden in the woods. A fierce battle drove the Federals back from the peach orchard to their original position. By the end of the day, 6,000 Union and Confederate soldiers lay strewn across this position. The Evergreen Cemetery, Gettysburg's public cemetery, is situated along the southeastern slope of the Federal line. In the early evening, Confederate troops launched an attack on this position, charging uphill, reaching the crest, and engaging in hand-to-hand combat. As darkness set in, the fighting continued. As Union troops were sent in to reinforce the cemetery hill, the rebels fell back in defeat around 10 p.m. Starting out on the third day's battlefield, we drive along the line of Union forces. Here we see the landscape filled with monuments and artillery. During the battle, there were 626 pieces of artillery. 354 were Union and 272 Confederate. During the battle, it was estimated that 569 tons of artillery shells were fired by opposing armies. With approximately 1,400 monuments on the battlefield, the largest and most prominent is this one, the Pennsylvania Monument. Dedicated on September 27, 1910, the surrounding tablets bear the names of more than 34,000 Pennsylvanians, who made up more than 1/3 of the Union forces here in Gettysburg. A winged bronze figure on top of the memorial represents the goddess of victory and peace. On the other side of the field, monuments to the Confederate forces tell the story of the brave men of the South who made the gallant charge across nearly 1 mile of open field during the third day's battle. The most dominant is the Virginia Memorial that bears the figure of General Robert E. Lee, mounted on his favorite horse, Traveler. It was here that Lee observed Pickett's charge. At about noon on July 3, 1863, about 150 Confederate cannons began shelling the Union lines, hoping to soften up the Union position. The Federal artillery, about 100 cannons, responded, and for nearly 2 hours the ground shook. After the first few minutes, Confederate gunners lost their aim, and many shells began to sail beyond the Union lines. While the overshooting caused chaos in the rear, the front-line troops and artillery the Confederates hoped to destroy were relatively unscathed. As the artillery barrage ended, Pickett's men, joined by other units, emerged from a line of trees. Their front was about a mile wide. More than 12,000 men, arranged behind their regimental flags, began to march across the fields. At the command of General George Pickett, the Confederates advanced as if on parade, and the Union artillery opened fire. Artillery shells designed to explode in the air and send shrapnel downward began to kill and maim advancing soldiers. As a line of Confederates advanced, the Union gunners switched to deadly canister shot, metal balls that tore into troops like gigantic shotgun shells. Ultimately, the Confederates advanced to a zone where Union riflemen could fire into the charge. As the Confederates came close to the Union lines, they focused on a cluster of trees that would become a grim landmark. Nearby, a stone wall made a 90-degree turn called the Angle. It also became an iconic spot on the battlefield. Despite the withering casualties and hundreds of dead and wounded left behind, several thousand Confederates made it to the Union defensive line. Brief and intense scenes of combat, much of it hand-to-hand, occurred. But the Confederate attack had failed. The attackers who survived were taken prisoner. The dead and wounded littered the field. Witnesses were stunned by the carnage. An entire mile of field covered with bodies. In all, with 164,000 men fighting here in Gettysburg, 51,000 were listed as casualties during the 3 days of fighting. 8,000 dead, 33,000 wounded, and 10,000 missing in action. The battle had ended in 3 days. Proper burial would take much longer. A 17-acre plot, part of the field in which they fought, was chosen as the burial site for the Union dead. Almost 3,500 Union soldiers rest in this cemetery. Of that number, nearly half are unknown. Dedication ceremonies took place on November 19, 1863. President Lincoln took only 2 minutes to deliver what would become known as his Gettysburg Address. When you're in the mood to shop, or you want a bite to eat, take a walk down Carlisle Street. Here are some of our favorite picks. There's a shop for every taste in Gettysburg.
The Union Cigar Club is the name of the store, but it's a retail store where people can come in and enjoy a fine cigar. Opened it 9 years ago because they threw me out of all the bars to smoke in, so my mission was to break even and smoke my own cigars. Probably become the social center of the town in terms of people who stop by and sit around and smoke a cigar and converse.
A few blocks up the street, meet Eric Dorr, curator of the Gettysburg Museum.
We're an American history museum, so our artifacts go as far back as an ancient Egyptian mummy, and it goes up to current day and everything in between. Some of the other really unique items we have, though, we have Abraham Lincoln's wallet, we have a lot of items tied to Lincoln. We have John Wilkes Booth's splint. We have a lot of items from World War I and World War II. You know, Gettysburg was the U.S. Tank Corps training camp during World War I. We have a lock of George and Martha Washington's hair. A lot of people are very fascinated by our Hitler items. We have a lot of items that were taken from his home in Berchtesgaden, the Berghof, and brought here by American soldiers. So we have some of his personal items. We also have a piece of the couch where he killed himself with his blood on, which is a really unique item.
The Farnsworth House offers historical rooms at an inn with its own Civil War past.
The Union Army was at the top of the hill. The Confederate Army drove them through the town and drove them to the top of the hill. And then the Confederates took over the house and houses near here, and they used it as a sharpshooter's nest. Okay? And of course, every time they'd fire a round from the garret, the Union Army at the top of the hill would see the puff of smoke, and of course they drew fire on the house. So we have over 150 bullet holes in the side of the house. We're the only Civil War themed restaurant in the area. And so any history buffs or anything, it really draws them. So also military people. West Point comes here a lot. The menu that's designed early type of peanut soup, pumpkin fritters, spoon bread's very popular. That's an old Southern dish that we use. So we use some of the dishes are early American. We have 11 rooms. We have 5 in the house, and we have 4 in the garden area. And they're, of course, the Victorian period, and that's what the decor is. And we keep them pretty full. And we're also noted for hauntings, too. Okay. We like to be known for history first, and then ghosts second.
Everyone needs a souvenir. For the finest selection, try the Union Drummer Boy, authentic museum-quality Civil War artifacts.
We specialize in original Civil War artifacts, muskets and swords and revolvers and items that the soldiers would have had during the American Civil War. We've had some very special artifacts. Currently I have a hat that was worn by a Confederate general at Gettysburg and a tree that has 16 cannonball fragments in it from the Gettysburg campaign. We currently have several thousand items on exhibit, so it's ranging from soldiers' letters and documents to the hard artifacts they would have had with them in camp and in battle.
If you're going to visit Gettysburg, you must eat at Ernie's. It's a Gettysburg tradition. Their hot dog recipe dates back to 1921. I'm going to get the Texas Wiener. R.J. Gibson's studio, authentic Civil War photography. I'm going to get my picture taken. I've heard about this, you know. They say the trick is to be dignified. I can smile, but I can't show my teeth. Wish me luck.
This is called the wet plate collodion process, the same process that was used in the 1860s. Now, this starts out by using something called collodion. I have to make all these solutions myself. This is a mixture of nitrocellulose, ether, 190 proof alcohol. You had to be as much of a chemist as you were an artist back in the day. Now, collodion was first used as a liquid bandage. They still use it for some medical procedures today. I take that same raw collodion, I add the various chemicals to it to create the solution, which I'm going to make light sensitive. So now that I've created an emulsion, what I'm going to do is bring this to the dark room and immerse it into a tank of silver nitrate. This way, please. All right, let all that sort of nice and out like that. Turn a little bit at an angle this way. Let's place your hand right up there. Good. Arch the back nice and tall. Very good. Not quite arch so much. A little bit forward more for me. There. Okay. Now coming behind you is a headrest. This was used behind everybody standing in a photograph back then. This was to give you a reference point. If you stay against this, you will stay in focus for us. Moving things, okay. All right, absolutely still. I'm gonna go grab the plate. When I come back out, I will give you some final instructions. Okay, off I go to the dark room. Now listen carefully. This is unlike any photograph you've ever had taken before. This is gonna take, about 17 seconds to take this image. All I'm gonna do is remove the lens cap and count. So during that time, it is okay to blink your eyes, it's okay to breathe, but you can't move at all. Listen still, and counting. Notice the image is reversed, upside down and backwards is how I'm looking at you in the image here. So tintypes are always a backwards image. This is my fixer. This is potassium cyanide, the same chemistry they used back in the 1800s. Now this is unlike any other photographic process before or since. Okay, here we go. This young lady is time travel. This is the closest you'll ever get to living in the 1860s. What's happening is the fixer is dissolving all the unexposed silver, so underneath that negative image is a positive photograph. You just need to coax it out of there a little bit. You can imagine how amazing it was in the 1860s to see something like this.
Oh, sure.
You could see why the American Indians thought they were truly stealing your soul. Okay, here it comes. And there you are, 150 years ago. It's like looking at your ancestors.
I played the pump and I took the pump and I watered whiskey down. I talked to horse.
Welcome to Gettysburg, a drinking town with a history problem.
Well, we've been to 2 bars so far.
And I heard them say that Jimmy's making money far away. Some people left for heaven without warning. So we walked them to the station in the rain, and we kissed them as we put them on the train, and we sang in the song, time long gone, knowing that we would meet again.
I took all the ideas from all the bars that I used to drink in and enjoyed when I was growing up in Ireland, so tried to make sure that it was as authentic as possible, not a cookie-cutter Irish pub. So it's more that, I mean, we have a saying, it's kill, count, chuck, crack, which is Gaelic for music, talk, and fun. So that's the type of thing that we go for, you know. The food, Josh, the chef, does a phenomenal job on himself, but most of the food, or a lot of the staples on the menu are family recipes, traditional stuff that we grew up eating at home. I've always said, you know, we give you 4 walls and a roof. You make it what it is. I mean, you say the people that come in are the stars of the bar. You know, those are the ones that make it what it is.
I moved here because I spent a weekend up here and I just fell in love with the whole town. I love the history of the Civil War, but it's the atmosphere here and the people that make it so much more.
It is certainly a drinking town with history, probably.
It's a very friendly environment. Like you're kind of treated like family here. Like no one's rude, no one's mean. When we like went to college in a big like city-esque area, and where like no one really knew anyone, and they kind of treated you like poop. And like here, you know, it's very friendly and family-esque.
I love it. I'm actually considering moving here, so because I was a history major, so I love the history, and like she said, the people are very welcoming and just it's a beautiful town.
They took the road for God knows in the morning.
We've only scratched the surface of the many sights of Gettysburg during our visit. Come experience Gettysburg for yourself and learn about the sights, sounds, and the stars and bars of this historic Pennsylvania town. I'm Mary Jo Powell. Thanks for joining us.
In 1861, hostilities between the industrial North and the agricultural South erupted as the Confederate artillery fired upon the Union federal garrison at Fort Sumter, located in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, marking the beginning of the bloody Civil War. That same year, Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles adopted the idea of a decoration to recognize and honor distinguished naval service, which included a provision for a Navy Medal of Valor signed into law by President Lincoln to be bestowed upon such petty officers, seamen, landsmen, and Marines as shall most distinguish themselves by their gallantry and other seamen-like qualities during the present war. In 1862, the Navy Department ordered 175 medals with the words "Personal Valor" inscribed on the back. The chairman of the Senate Committee on Military Affairs introduced a resolution for an Army Medal of Honor. The resolution was approved by Congress and signed into law. This measure provided for awarding a Medal of Honor to such non-commissioned officers and privates as shall most distinguish themselves by their gallantry in action and other soldier-like qualities during the present insurrection, and was deemed the Medal of Honor. Congress made the Medal of Honor a permanent decoration a year later, and on March 3, 1863, Army officers also became eligible. The first Medals of Honor were presented to 6 Union Army volunteers on March 25, 1863, in the office of the Secretary of War. Of the Andrew Raiders, Private Jacob Parrott from Ohio became the first recipient of the medal for his volunteering for and participation in a raid on a Confederate train in Big Shanty, Georgia. The first Navy Medal of Honor went to 41 sailors awarded by Secretary of War Stanton on April 4, 1863, and the first Marine awarded the Navy Medal of Honor on July 10th. Sergeant William Carney of the 54th Massachusetts was the first African-American recipient, awarded for his actions on July 18, 1863, at Battery Wagner, South Carolina, while a member of the state's first all-black regiment. The first Latin American recipient was Corporal Joseph H. DeCastro of the Union Army for his actions at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Since 1944, the Medal of Honor has been attached to a light blue-colored silk neck ribbon. The center of the ribbon displays 13 white stars in the form of chevrons and is one of only 2 military neck order awards, and is the only neck order that is awarded to members of the armed forces. Previously, members of the Army Air Corps and Air Force received the Army versions of the medal. Today, there are 3 versions of the Medal of Honor, one for each of the departments, Army, Navy, and Air Force. Members of the Marine Corps and Coast Guard are eligible to receive the Navy version. Each is constructed differently. Today, the Medal of Honor is the United States of America's highest military honor, awarded for personal acts of valor above and beyond the call of duty. The medal is awarded by the President in the name of the U.S. Congress and to U.S. military personnel only. There have been more than 3,000 Medals of Honor awarded since the decoration's creation, with more than half of them presented for actions during the 4 years of the American Civil War. At the birthplace of this conflict, Charleston, South Carolina, plans for a new museum dedicated to America's most honored heroes is slated for construction to house the new National Medal of Honor Museum. As a newly formed organization, the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit educational organization created to design, fund, build, and maintain the new National Medal of Honor Museum. Its mission, to preserve and present the extraordinary stories of individuals who reach the highest level of recognition above and beyond the call of duty in the service to the nation. To inspire current and future generations about the ideals of courage, integrity, patriotism, leadership, and sacrifice, to help them understand the meaning and price of freedom, and to encourage them to embrace their responsibilities as citizens in a democracy. The goal of the foundation is to create the only museum in the country that brings together the story of the Medal of Honor, its recipients, and all the wars in which they fought. Your tax-deductible donations can be made payable to the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, P.O. Box 309, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, 29465-0309, or visit our website at www.mohmuseum.org.
I've got grandkids, and I look at the role models, I look at the environment they grow up in, and I'm concerned about their future. And my goal is to, after my death, not only influence their future, but to influence the futures of generations yet unborn. How do we do that? And I think one of the ways we can accomplish that goal is, first of all, we got the character development program, which we're trying to put in schools all throughout the nation. We're trying to use the story and legacy of Medal of Honor recipients, what they represent, pluck out those elements that really signify their character, create this mechanism that we can get it in every school throughout the nation.
I think you have to look at where we have been in America and where we're going and how we're participating. It's true, we have a museum for the Marine Corps, we've got one going for the Army, we've got several museums that are ones that recognize service throughout the country, but there's never been a National Medal of Honor Museum. And the National Medal of Honor Museum will in fact be one that's a beacon, and it will provide for visitors and Americans a view into the history of this country in terms of not only the service of Medal of Honor recipients that have served in the various services during the various wars, but also reflective of the service of the men and women that have served from the start of this country to the current and into the future. I think it's important for people to be able to come to a museum of that nature and say, well, this is a model of service and sacrifice of young Americans, men and women that have stepped forward to preserve the freedoms of this country.
There's really kind of a lack of history being taught, and I think it's important for us to make sure that we give some of our kids, our younger ones that are in middle school and high school, give them a sense of the history of our country and some of the sacrifices that have taken place. And not only that, but to get them interested in citizenship and responsibility and what the people that served our nation's military did to preserve the freedom that this country enjoys. And that includes the courage, the selflessness that people have sacrificed for their families and so forth.
We want to inspire our young Americans to become better citizens. They're going to walk in the door with one attitude and walk out with a different attitude. I'd like to see them realize that they are important and they are our future. What they do or what they fail to do is going to determine whether they live in a free society like they enjoy today. So this museum is going to highlight all the actions of these great Americans through history, from all races, all colors, all ethnic groups, so they can see the sacrifices that's gone over and over in this history of our great country.
We need a National Medal of Honor Museum, not for the Medal of Honor Society, but for the nation, because there is no one place where young people or older folks can go and understand the Medal of Honor and the people that have worn it historically, and can understand what it means. And duty, honor, and country is personified by people that wear the medal. And every one of us will tell you we just did our job. This comes to you, you don't go to it.
There is a divisiveness in our country right now, our nation. And I believe this project can be the heartbeat that'll bring this nation together. Not so much because of us, the Medal of Honor recipients. It's going to be a showpiece for the nation. When completed, it's going to be open to teachers, to students, to university students, to visitors from all over the world. And I really believe that, that even though we have a lot of other museums in this country, this one here, I believe, will bring this country back together. That's how sincere I am about making sure this museum is completed.
It's about the values that we represent. We're kind of like an all-star team for the veterans. All-star teams, we know that often the best players don't make the all-star team. And that's the same in our case. So we, in that capacity, represent all the veterans. America has no kings or queens, but we do have a nobility. America's nobility is our veterans. So that's what it's all about.
It's a great opportunity here we got in the next couple of years to build a lasting memorial to all those who have served. It's called the Medal of Honor Museum, but the Medal of Honor Museum is a lasting memorial to anyone who has ever worn the cloth of this nation. And I want all veterans to feel that the Medal of Honor Museum is not a home just for Medal of Honor recipients. It's their home. And I want them to come and bring their families to their home. And Semper Fi to all of you.
In times of conflict, a few that place their lives above all are recognized with America's highest military order, the Medal of Honor. The National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, needs your help in preserving their legacy and in educating and inspiring future generations. Your tax-deductible donations can be made to the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, P.O. Box 309, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, 29465. Visit our website at www.mohmuseum.org or our Facebook page at National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation.
Panama. Finally, after almost 40 years, I revisited the land where some of my youth was spent while serving in the Army in the 1970s. Since then, things have changed tremendously. During my 2 years here in the mid-1970s, the country was ruled by Omar Torrijos, who mysteriously died in a plane crash in the early 80s, and the country was taken over by dictator Manuel Noriega. After U.S. military intervention, the country changed toward democracy and enjoyed economical growth. In fact, one of the best economies in all Latin America. My journey is a place known as Boquete, or Valley of the Flowers, a town in the highlands of the Cherokee Province, about 20 miles from the Costa Rican border. Boquete is a town that is inhabited by many expats, mostly U.S. and Canadians. The attraction here is the cool climate, which stems from 70 to 80 degrees all year long, not to mention the low cost of living and natural foods. Along with the international crowd, one finds a mixture of Indians known as the Gobi, and also Panamanians, and of course, the Gringos. Upon my arrival to the Valley of Flowers, I was greeted with all the shops closed. It's Mother's Day, a holiday that Panamanians take seriously. So exploring on my own, I decided to check out the landscape. Here I wandered to the Central Park, an area shared as a place to sit and relax or wait for a bus. As everything was closed, I did find a nice cozy spot called Mike's, where expats hang out and enjoy a mixture of international cuisine and cold adult beverages. Early Tuesday morning, I found myself crossing the bridge to attend the weekly Gringo Market. Here, anything organic is a big item on the hit list, along with baked goods, other wares, and even a chiropractor will give you an adjustment. And if you're stressed out, you can even get a massage. Afterwards, breakfast at the Central Park Cafe, consisting of beefsteak, 2 eggs, a corn tortilla, fresh bread, and the best juice I've ever tasted, and of course, coffee, all for the price of just about $6. Summoning my friend Charlie, an American expat, we were off the trek to the highlands. Here I had a chance to visit the coffee plantations, high mountain cliffs, and even waterfalls. Many nature lovers come to this place to view the beauty of the mountains, the waterfalls, see the clouds hover over the mountains, and climb the dormant volcano known as Volcan Baru. At an elevation of 11,398 feet, it is said that on a clear day, you can see both the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean from the top. But clear days isn't something Boquete sees very often. It's always rainy here, mostly from the drizzle of low-flying clouds. But as fortune has it, during one of my jungle treks, I became witness to a remarkable rainbow with the Volcan Baru in the background, which is a normal occurrence in this area. Further down the road, we came upon the abandoned castle of Boquete. Built 40 years ago, the landowner died of a sudden heart attack during the construction, and the castle was never completed, nor inhabited. Well, perhaps today by squatters. Calling it a day, we ended up again at Mike's. We indulged in adult beverages as many expats do, and just talking the night away. Here, no worries about American politics, Al-Qaeda, Obama, or ISIS. Just plain conversation of just about anything else. Here, everyone displays the mañana attitude, or why should I do it now when I can do it tomorrow? Retiring for the night, I returned to my casita for a good night's slumber. But a surprise awakened me at 4:30 in the morning, as my bed was rocked back and forth by an earthquake tremor measuring 6.6 on the Richter scale, the second in 3 days. Seated on the Continental Divide, earthquake tremors here are a common occurrence. The next morning, I ventured up the streets of Boquete and noticed that ecotourism, coffee plantation tours, horseback riding, and jungle zip lines are a big industry here, mostly sold by gringo expats. Want to learn Spanish? They have a school for that too. Don't be intimidated by local police riding around on motorcycles and carrying automatic weapons. Their role is simply to keep the peace. We even have a fire department in Boquete and a medical clinic in case someone is injured or just needs regular medical help. After a day of hiking, I found myself headed back to Mike's to enjoy a nice bowl of chili and a cold Panamanian beer. The next morning, I was collected by my friend Bubba, another American expat who was born and raised in the former Canal Zone, and after a career in the military, retired here with his wife and his dog Buddy. Exploring the regions of Volcan, we stopped to visit the top of a waterfalls racing over a deep canyon, another beautiful wonder of the Panamanian landscape. Careful not to fall over, these drops are deep and the rocks are slippery. But as Bubba told me not to worry, he would be happy to escort my body home in case I did fall. After a day of roaming, we stopped at a local restaurant and enjoyed a treat I haven't had for many years. Ceviche, raw fish marinated in herbs and spices that leave a desire for more. This is the best place in Boquete to get it, as I am told, and you'll find no argument here. As darkness came, saying goodbye to my friend Bubba, well, you know the rest. I could easily become an alcoholic here, but as I learned, there isn't much to do. Boquete is a lovely place to visit, but it has its issues. Water is a big deal here, and before visiting, make sure the place you're staying at has hot water. After saying goodbye to Paquete, I boarded my plane in the city of David and headed for Panama City. After about a 30 or 40 minute flight, we crossed the Bridge of the Americas, the Pacific entrance to the Panama Canal, before touching down on terra firma. Here I landed at Albrook Airport, an old American air base now under Panamanian control. Outside my hotel room, I could see Ancon Hill, where once the American flag flew until the peanut farmer gave it all back to the Panamanians in the year 2000. This 654-foot hill stood overlooking the entrance of the Panama Canal and the outskirts of Panama City. Now seeing the flag of Panama flying, it states the sovereignty of the Panamanian people and a government free of American influence. Adjacent to the entrance of my hotel, a huge mall dominated the entire area, and I mean huge. Almost anything you want is here, including American food chains and good American-style prices for all the goods. But as I wandered about, I hear American seasonal music. It's Christmas time, and the entire population of Panama City seems to have congregated here to do their shopping. The next morning, after hiring a driver, I requested a trip to Casco Viejo, translated as the Old Quarter. Settled in 1673, it was built after the near destruction of Old Panama, the original Panama City, raided by the pirate Henry Morgan. The prize he was after sits on the outer regions of the area, the Church of the Golden Altar. In the Iglesia de San Jose, a wooden altar covered with gold was part of the original church of Old Panama. When pirate Henry Morgan attacked the city, the Jesuits painted the altar black to hide the gold. The pirates left it alone, thinking it was worthless. After Morgan sacked and burned the Old Panama, the Jesuit monks of the Order of St. Augustine moved the altar to the new church and its present location, taking off the black paint. Casco Viejo is a mixture of the old and new. Here you see old buildings getting a new life as the area is dominated by skyscrapers of Panama City across the channel. Coffee houses, restaurants, and old Spanish-style architecture with a mixture of local tourists flooding the streets. At the town square, a commotion is noticed as dozens of San Blas Indian women are congregating about. A local group, probably a religious group, is handing out clothing to the Indians in what must be a gesture of the season. The San Blas or Cuna Indians are one of about 6 indigenous tribes of Panama. Known for the colorful hand-stitched cloths known as molas, the Cunas live in old traditional ways on an island called San Blas and make their money mostly by the tourist trade. And they really don't like to have their photos taken unless you pay them, and if you don't, they'll turn away. After spending the day in Casco Viejo, I decided it was time to beat it back to my hotel before the approaching rain ruins my day. No Mike's here to keep me entertained, so back again to the mall to find some Christmas bargains. The next morning, my driver picks me up as my time is limited. I go home today. He takes me to see the sights I remember from my ill-begotten youth. As we're traveling along, a Chiva bus, known as the Red Devil, passes us along the way as we approach the old Panama Canal Administration Building. On this journey, I once again see the Bridge of the Americas, only this time at ground level. Many times as a young soldier, I have crossed this bridge to visit the former Canal Zone and Panama City. After a brief jaunt further across the bridge, we came to the former Howard Air Force Base, now a developed area known as Panama Pacifico. Commercial buildings and condos now dot the landscape, as many old military buildings are no longer standing. Here I spent the last 6 months of my deployment in the Army after an 18-month stint on the Atlantic side of the canal. On approach to the area, once known as Fort Kobe, I find that my old barracks is now in ruin and some of the buildings of the former command are being torn down. As I venture inside, the voices of the past echo in my head. Traveling further down the road, I found the old ammo bunker was just as we left it, and the beaches that we used to frequent are now a high-end resort hotel guarded by a security fence with no access for an old soldier taking a trip down the memory lane. After seeing the old-style Spanish domes on the road, I remember flying over this area on approach to Albrook. With a few hours to spare, we end up at the former Fort Clayton, which was a major Army base during the days of the Canal Zone. I was happy to see that they kept it up and that the U.S. Embassy now resides in this area. Most of the housing here are high-end, and former military structures have been converted to beautiful homes, most likely for embassy personnel. Across the way, a ship transiting the canal on its last leg of the journey goes through the Miraflores locks. A new canal museum appeases tourists by the busload for a charge of $15 admission, but my time is running out and I must return to catch my plane. The new Panama has a lot to offer for those who visit. I caution against going anywhere alone, and especially at nighttime, and always bargain for your goods, and especially taxi rides. In the tourist areas such as Casco Viejo, they'll try to play gringo bingo, gouging the prices, but should you not be able to negotiate a price, simply walk down a few blocks to the non-tourist area and catch a ride for a quarter of the price. As my journey ends, I, for the last time, drive through downtown Panama City, remembering what it was like then and how it is modernized now, and check this trip off my bucket list.